Clarence Mackel Sweetney was born in 1904 in Washington, D.C. His father was George Sweetney, a native of Bryantown, Charles County. His mother was Maude Mackel, the daughter of Bernard and Lizzie Mackel of Piscataway, Charles County, Maryland. The Mackel surname was spelled Mackel and Mackel in the early records. The name had importance, and Maude gave Clarence her maiden name as his middle name. Sometimes in the early 1900s, Maude left the family land in Charles County and met George, where they married in Washington, D.C. on June the 2nd, 1903. The couple lived at 1835 L Street, Northwest, and would go on to have 5 children in 5 years: Joseph, George Jr., Elizabeth, Mamie, and Clarence. The family had a normal life, and all was well with George Sr., who worked as a butler to support Maude and the kids. But by 1909, the Sweetneys' fortunes would change, as a chain of unexpected circumstances and events would change the family forever. On the morning of September the 21st, 1908, George was on his way to work as a butler. He walked to the corner of 2nd and 8th Street Northeast, a place where people boarded the streetcar. George was the last of the bunch to board the trolley. As he put his food on the boarding step, the conductor abruptly started the engine, knocking Sweetney off the train, hitting him, and dragging him several feet. Bystanders yelled for the trolley to stop. George was pulled from under the trolley and taken to a hospital to receive medical attention. He was badly injured, and the Sweetney family suspected there was no accident. They believed the operator of the streetcar intentionally started the engine before George could board. He claimed that the negligence of the conductor caused him to sustain permanent injuries. As the family waited for the lawsuit to move through the courts, which would almost certainly result in a substantial payout, George would mysteriously die in October of 1909 at the age of 31. The official cause of his death was given as exhaustion from tuberculosis. With his sudden death and a loss of the money he was bringing in to support the family, Maude and the children were unable to stay in the house on L Street. They moved to a shanty town called Government Alley, where she worked as a laundress to feed the family and make ends meet. Ma Sweetney tried her best, but was unable to keep them from the traps and vices of the street. Clarence, George, and Elizabeth all became involved in crime, with the siblings first being arrested in 1919 for different offenses. By 1920, George Jr. was 16 and incarcerated at the National Training School for Boys. That same year, Maude would remarry and take Joseph to live with her and her new family. But she worried about Clarence and Elizabeth. She wanted to keep them out of trouble, so she sent them to live with her family in Prince George's County, Maryland. But it didn't work. Clarence, attracted to the dangers and vices of the ghettos, would return to D.C. by 1922 and pick up right where he left off. In 1922 and in 1926, he was convicted of traffic violations and was sentenced to a short jail term for both convictions. He managed to steer clear of the law for the next several years, but fate again would come and visit him. One day, while walking down 13th Street near the intersection of U Street, it seems like any other day. The street was fairly clear except for a couple pedestrians. The sun was shining brightly. As he began to walk, something seemed amiss. As he gazed up, the traffic light on the corner of 13th Street began to flicker. He thought that it was strange, but continued on his stroll. All of a sudden, there was a loud blast. A large explosion ripped a hole in the sidewalk and sent pieces of concrete and debris flying everywhere. Nearby witnesses report seeing flames shoot into the air. He was disoriented, and a thick billowing smoke made it hard to see. With bodies flying through the air, Clarence must have thought he was dreaming. 3 people were seriously injured, and a 36-year-old woman was killed. Officials launched an inquiry into the cause of the explosion and determined that the source to be a gas main. Some tried to blame it on a person discarding a cigarette. Others claimed that the gas may have been ignited by a mysterious streetcar plow. Whatever the cause, Clarence was badly injured, but he managed to escape death. Nearly killed by a piece of falling concrete, he stubbornly refused medical attention. He was limping, but he managed to walk off into the sunset. From 1926 through 1930, Sweetney had successfully avoided contact with the law, but in the coming decade, he would become a notorious criminal and a hardened convict, going on a nationwide tour of state and federal prisons, solidifying his name among the creme de la creme of the early Washington, D.C. convicts. In 1932, Clarence was arrested by Washington Metropolitan Police for threatening to kill another man. He received a sentence of 30 days suspended. He was released, and by the next year he was charged with robbery. After this conviction, Sweetney was sent to Lorton Reformatory in Virginia to serve a 2-year sentence in 1933. Several months into his sentence, officials were determined that Clarence wasn't a good fit for the institution. That's because shortly after his arrival, a serious riot broke out in the prison, where inmates destroyed property, set fires, and assaulted staff, labeled the food riot by reporters. Lorton administration would downplay the melee to the media, claiming it was just a minor incident stemming from a fight between 2 men. However, after concluding their internal investigation, they determined the ringleader to be none other than our brother Clarence Sweetney. To punish him, he was kicked out of Lorton and sent to USP Lewisburg, a federal prison with a notorious reputation. But Clarence didn't fit in there either, and a month later, he was sent to Camp Eunice, a federal prison in Virginia, to finish out his sentence. When he arrived at the camp, he had a fresh new start. He behaved different and had a different appearance of a changed man. It seemed to be a good fit for him. No behavior infractions, no fights, no strikes, no riots. He had all the characteristics of a model prisoner. But after a month, he disappeared. After being unable to locate Sweetney during head count, prison officials sounded the alarm and began to scour the surrounding areas looking for the escaped convict. After several hours on the run, he was finally captured in the woods, not far from the prison camp. A year was tacked on to his sentence for the escape. He remained there until he was discharged on December the 17th, 1935, released just in time to spend the holidays with his family. But his freedom would be short-lived because by 1936, Clarence will be facing a brand new charge. This time he was charged with stealing a car. Convicted of auto theft, he will be sent back to Lorton in December of 1936 to serve 1 to 5 year sentence. But as always, Clarence would make the most of his time. While there, Brother Sweetney engaged in an argument with one of his fellow convicts. Unsatisfied with the verdict, he returned to the dorms to once again plead his case. When he made his way through the sleeping quarters, he found his debate partner taking a nap. Clarence decided to wake up the man by stabbing him 5 times. The victim survived the horrific attack, and Sweetney was placed in isolation. Little to no sunlight, no human contact, bread and water diet, and a waste bucket were measures to use to correct the behavior or break the soul in the isolation cells in Lorton. After spending several months in solitary, Sweetney returned to the main compound. Officials didn't notice a change. He immediately received infractions for, quote, fighting everyone in sight. And with several more write-ups for yelling and cursing from his cell, Sweetney was sent to Gallagher Hospital for mental evaluation. Officials there were unable to make a diagnosis, so he was transferred to St. Elizabeth's Hospital. Psychologists there determined that Sweetney was perfectly sane, but they kept him there anyway. Unable to work the insanity angle, Sweetney filed habeas corpus motion in June 1939 to get sent back to Lorton. It was successful, and officials at Lorton braced for his return. When he arrived, he refused to come out of his cell. When he came out of his cell, he refused to go back in his cell. When he was summoned by the dinner bell, he refused to go and eat, and when he went to go eat, he refused to leave the dining hall. For these infractions, he was once again placed in the hole on October the 2nd, 1939. But this time, it would be different. While in solitary confinement, his dear mother Maude would die 2 weeks later on October the 19th, 1939. But by this time, Lorton administration had had enough of his antics and had no sympathy for the death of his dear mother. When he was released from isolation, Sweetney once again transferred out of Lorton and this time sent to the notorious USP Atlanta. This did not break him, and it only made him more hardened. While at Atlanta, he was described as a man with vicious tendencies and the determination to refuse to submit to authority. Officials there suspected Sweetney of attempting to incite a work strike by persuading fellow inmates to stop working at their jobs in the prison factories. February of 1940, he was written up for loafing and agitating. Placed in isolation and given a restricted diet of bread and water, the corrective measures did not correct Sweetney. And in April of 1940, he went back to the hole for destroying property. Once again, Sweetney was deemed unfit for the institution. Prisons officials said that if he remained at USP Atlanta, that he would have to be kept in segregation indefinitely. The administration could not for the life of them understand why Sweetney refused to obey the rules. He had all the characteristics of a lifer, but he only had a 2-year sentence. Once again, he was sent to a mental hospital for evaluation. After his discharge from the mental hospital, he was transferred to the notorious Alcatraz, nicknamed the Rock for his reputation of breaking hardened inmates. Clarence will remain there for 3 years until he was discharged in 1943. The death of his father as an infant, the death of his mother when he was in the hole, the hardened prisons and falling concrete could not break his soul. But by 1950, Clarence was out of prison and off parole. He married Alice Brown and moved to a house in Northwest D.C. His brother George would move to their family land and operate a tavern in Charles County, Maryland. And his sister Elizabeth would still be in and out of prison. Clarence Sweetney's family suffered a generational curse. His people had come off the plantations of southern Maryland and migrated to the nation's capital in the late 1800s, seeking a better life and more opportunity, only to find segregation, deprivation, and despair. After the death of their father, the Sweetney children became involved in crime. And although Clarence's adult life, he had been to 2 state prisons, 3 mental hospitals, and 4 federal prisons, including the notorious Alcatraz. He had broken almost every prison rule in the book, but he managed to finally turn it around at the end. He died in New York in 1977. Rest well, Brother Sweetney. Rest well.